So I think overall it was a productive trip, but I wasn't able to do the stuff that I generally do. Like you said, I tried to write something. I definitely tried to visit the temples. And in Chennai, I was able to visit the Hare Krishna temple in Chennai. And that was an interesting experience in itself. If I had time, I would have written about it. But in Delhi, I was so busy, I couldn't go to the temple. And obviously, I didn't get time to go to Vrindavan. Okay, so we are a little over 5 minutes past the hour, and perhaps we can start with the presentation on the 17th chapter, Divisions of Faith. So if the group one is ready, this person, devotee, can start us off. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. This is Vamsi Gopalas from group 1. Good to see you back, Prabhu. We are missing the association as well as, it's been more than what we thought it would be. And good to see. I'm more eager to have these classes continuously and complete the Bhaktisastri sooner with the enlightening classes and, share the spiritual knowledge. So today we'll be doing the Bhagavad Gita 7, chapter 17th. It's Divisions of the Faith. And in the chapter 16, Krishna has established that faithful followers of Shastra are divine and who are the faithless are demoniac. And in this chapter, it's about the divisions of faith, how which category does a man fit who follows the faith, something other than the Shastra. The faith and worship and foods in the modes are being discussed in the first 10 verses of this chapter. So in the first verse, Arjuna inquired Krishna, what is the situation of those who do not follow the principles of scripture but worship according to their own imagination, whether they are in mode of goodness or passion or ignorance. And in the next verse, Krishna answered that, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: in goodness, in passion, and in ignorance. And so that's why it can be one of the modes. And how to change the influence of the modes also given in the purport and translation somewhere. By the help of spiritual master and by obeying the rules of scriptures, I think one can transcend from these three modes. And in the 3rd verse to 7th verse, it talks about the faith and worship. So in the 3rd verse talks about everyone has a particular faith regardless of what he is, but his faith is considered good, passionate, or ignorant according to the nature he has acquired. And also which who worship whom based on the whether they are in a mode of goodness or passion or ignorance is discussed in the verse 4, where men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods, and those in mode of passion worship the demons, and those in the mode of ignorance worship the ghosts and spirits. And in the verse 5th and 6th talk about defining the demons who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures, performing them for out of the pride and egoism, and who are impelled by the lust and attachment, who are foolish and who torture the material elements of the body as well as the super soul dwelling within, are the ones called demons. And different aspects of the life also related to these three modes: faith and worship, food, sacrifice, conduct, speech, mind control, and charity. And for the mode of goodness, there was an example I read about 3 brothers like as Vibhushan, Ravana, and Kumbhakarna. So these 3 represents the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, and also food in the mode, right? In the last few verses talk about in terms of different situations in the mode of material nature. There are difference of in the manner eating and performing sacrifices, austerities, and charities, and they are all not conducted on the same level. For the example, in the food, in the modes, for the people who are in the mode of goodness, eat the wholesome food, juicy and pleasing foods, and whereas the mode in the people in the passion eats bitter or sour food, hot and pungent and burning, and people in the mode of ignorance eat tasteless, decomposed, and untouchable things. And also results are given for the people who eat the food in mode of goodness. The result will be a long life, purifying strength, desire-free, and happiness. Who eats the food in a passion results in a distress or misery and disease. And for the ignorance, it's an infection, disease, and contaminating early death. So it's all about we are what we eat. That is something we can take away from that. And the best food is, eating the remnants of Supreme Personality of Godhead, or, sadhus, or people, and people who are in a Shuddha Tattva. So that's how we can eat, we can purify ourselves and, try to elevate to the next level. So, and it's also said, like, I never heard this quotation, but we are not vegetarian, we are prasaditarians. So I think more of people will eat a vegetarian, but as a Krishna devotee, so we will be eating prasad. So it's called prasaditarians. It's a good word to use it. So I think this is what I can think of, Prabhuji, and thanks for everybody giving their inputs for this group one discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vamsi Gopal Prabhu. Yeah, I heard that quote. I think another flavor I heard is, we are not vegetarians, we are Krishnatarians. Once a devotee came, not devotee, but somebody came to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, I'm pure vegetarian. And Prabhupada said, even pigeons are vegetarian. So vegetarianism it's a means to an end and not an end itself. And I think that part is explained nicely in this chapter. Very good. Excellent way to start us off. Prabhu. Let's move on to group 2.
Hare Krishna. So we know that according to the first section, which was just presented, each person has a certain faith. And when the person chooses this faith, he does it not completely independently or unbiasedly, but rather he has a certain set of attachments, desires, and there are gunas which are influencing him, and all these are prompting the person to choose a certain type of faith or a set of guiding living principles or an object of their worship. So if the person has desires other than to worship Krishna, then these desires will be prompting him to worship someone else other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Lord Paramatma is going to guide this person and direct this person and give him faith according to his desires and attachments. So therefore, the object of our worship depends on the gunas that are influencing us. So this faith that each person has internally, outwardly, it manifests in 3 activities: yagya, sacrifice; tapa, austerity; and dana, donation or charity. So the same act of yagya, tapa, and dana performed under the influence of different gunas will bear different results. So this entire section describes how to perform yagya, tapa, and dana in the best possible way, and also it gives us the criteria that we can use to check ourselves, to see under which guna is influencing us right now, and to check our own worship, if it is correct or if it is right now under the influence of certain guna. So yagya, tapa, dana can be performed under the different modes. When it is performed in ignorance, it is performed out of the destructive motives against shastras, when people make up their own rules without faith, without respect and proper attention. And we know that according to chapter 14th, an action in the mode of ignorance develops foolishness, madness, and illusion. Therefore, the person's consciousness degrades. Then, if yagya, tapa, dana is performed in the mode of passion, It is usually done out of greed, out of desire to get something in return, out of pride, or reluctantly. So it's true that the person gets certain material results. However, we know that according to chapter 14, the action which is performed in the mode of passion, it always results in misery. So when yagya, tapa, dana are performed in the mode of goodness, it is usually done according to the scripture and out of duty or gratitude. When the person already doesn't ask for anything, but he rather understands that God already provided so much for him that he does it out of gratitude or out of duty and without expectation of return. Such yagya, tapa, and dana will result in knowledge, purification of the person, and happiness. However, we know that even the mode of goodness is binding. Therefore, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to perform yagya, tapa, and dana for the sake of the supreme absolute truth, out of love for the supreme personal truth, who is described in this chapter with the words Om Tat Sat. And one more prominent topic of this section is the description of various types of austerities. So our selfishness and our desire, our tendency to enjoy or kama manifests in our body, our speech, and our mind or our thoughts. And Krishna is saying that when the person attempts to reduce this kama in body, mind, and speech, and does it correctly, this austerity is greatly rewarded by the laws of karma. That's all.
Thank you, Mataji. Very well articulated, and I also like the way that you linked it. That's the essence of the chapter. I was planning to ask it as a question later on, but you already answered that question. That why does Krishna speak about this? It's also a good segue into the next group, into group 3's presentation.
Dandavat pranams, Prabhuji. I am representing group 3. Our question is, why does Krishna speak about the modes when he wants us to transcend them? In chapter 17, verses 5 and 6, Krishna speaks about the 3 modes of material nature in relate to bhakti. In verse 4, Krishna talks about faith in 3 modes: scriptural faith, no scriptural faith, and transcendental faith. In mode of goodness, people worship the demigods such as Durga, Kali, Indra, Chandra, and Varun. They worship the demigods for a particular purpose. In mode of passion, people do austerities and penances, which is not recommended in the scriptural injection, to achieve something material. Hiranyakashipu was praying to Lord Brahma to achieve immortality and to kill the demons. He was not consuming food and tortured his own body for the sake of lust and attachment. And also people who worship trees with a belief that it has ghost or worship ghost and dead people are all in the mode of ignorance. In Sloka 7 onwards, Krishna talks about the different situations in the modes of material nature, such as eating food which is offered to the Lord versus not offered to the Lord, and the types of food in 3 modes, and what it does to our body. Vamshi Prabhu already mentioned about that. Krishna also mentioned about performing sacrifices, austerities, and charities, which are not all conducted in the same level. Even if you do charities and do austerities in the mode of goodness, if it is not offering to Krishna, then there is no use. The reason why Krishna is talking about the modes of material nature is to guide us how to transcend them. Mode of goodness is better than mode of ignorance and passion. Bhakti should evolve from passion to goodness. That is the platform when bhakti starts. Unless you identify the modes within you and transcend them, pure bhakti is not possible. There is a process of gradual elevation. Prabhu says at the end of the chapter that one who is in Krishna consciousness is transcendental to all 3 modes of material nature. In this stage, we are able to serve the Lord without in reference to any of these modes. And basically, this is the pure bhakti.
Excellent. I think this was essentially an attempt to get the essence of the chapter, and nicely presented, CH1by Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, so we'll go on to the last group.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Gurudev. I am representing group 4, and our topic is chanting Om Tat Sat purifies activities. So here in this verse, in chapter 7, verse 23, here in Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna explaining the significance of powerful mantra Om Tat Sat, which is used in the beginning of or end of their activities by spiritual seekers. Om is the sound representation of Lord Krishna. Essentially, when one say Om, that means one is chanting the Lord's name. Tat Tavam Asi means that you are. It indicates God. Sat means truth, and God is ultimate truth, which is everlasting and unchanging. God is eternal, and he continues to exist even after the material world doesn't. Om Tat Sat independently and together reveal Brahman. By utterance of Om Tat Sat mantra, Shraddha convert even the Rajasic and Tamasic activities into Sattvic activities. Invoking this mantra purifies not only all activities and the motive behind the activities, it also removes all defects in worship as well. And if the activities of yagna, tapa, and dan are undertaken with the chanting of Om, the Supreme Tat, the universe, and the Sat, the real, the seeker's mind gives up all its selfishness, arrogance, and ego. For the transformation from tamas and rajas to sattva, chanting of Om Tat Sat is very important. This mantra can be chanted in the beginning of activities, or it can be chanted at the end as well. That's all, Prabhuji. Hari Bol. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. Very nice summary. So, so all of you did an excellent job in summarizing the chapter. This chapter is it's a deceptive chapter in the sense that it is relatively straightforward, but it also captures within it the essence of Krishna's mercy. And we'll try and unwrap that a little further. So let me share my screen. Okay, so one of the questions that we probably need to ask ourselves is why does Arjun ask what he does? So he asks that that if somebody is not following the scriptures but acting according to their own faith, is the person in the more of goodness, passion, or ignorance? So the impetus to that actually comes based on Krishna's. So Krishna presented in the 16th chapter a very diachromatic, like a very polar view, right? So what does he say in the 16th chapter? That if one who follows the scriptures is divine, and one who does not follow the scriptures is demoniac. So two ends of the spectrum, right? Nothing Krishna talks about in between. And Arjun is now representing everybody else. So somebody comes to you and makes this point that if you follow the scriptures, you're divine. If you're not, you're demoniac. And then the person might basically say, but there are so many people who are good, but they don't seem to follow the scriptures. What about them? So Arjun is collecting the query of this group of people, which actually is the majority. of the group. The predominant group of people fall in that category. That they do something which may be partially from the scriptures, partially from their own conception. They may give in charity. They may be truthful. All this is given in the scriptures, but they don't do it because they follow the scriptures, because of some other reason. So Arjun is representing all of is all of them. So that's why Arjun, on behalf of us, he puts this question to Krishna, and Krishna understanding the essence of the question, because superficially this question is just an inquiry. Then what about this? What about the people? And Krishna spends the chapter talking about these people, but Krishna being Krishna, he takes it to the next level. Right? He says maybe they're somewhere in between, but I'll also tell you a way that even these people can be elevated. So that's the hidden flow within the chapter that comes up in this conversation. So as I mentioned, 16th chapter, those who follow scriptures, divine; those who do not follow, demoniac. Right? And then there are some that follow but do not follow the scriptures. What exactly category do they fall in? So this is the division of the chapter. Krishna first talks about faith and worship, food, sacrifice, austerity, charity, and then he concludes with Om Tat Sat. So, excuse me. So one of the questions that comes up here is, why do they not follow the scriptures? Right. This is a question that we can ask ourselves, and it's a question that that's logical. That there are people who are acting in a certain way. Why not just act as per the scriptures? Right. And there are so many benefits to act according to the scriptures. So different reasons given by acharyas. This is by Vishwanath Chakravarti, that they lack the knowledge of the scriptures. So there are some people, these are innocent. It's not that they're willfully neglecting the scriptures, but they just don't know. Then there are those who know the scriptures, but they lack faith. So one of the things that we hear sometimes in India is, if you tell a pastime from the Puranas, they will say that it is mythical. It's a myth. Or sometimes they will say, I was reading an article in which they were saying that Lord Ram, who was a mythical figure in India. So Lord Ram is there in Ramayana. You have to accept it with strong faith. Otherwise, it's laziness that the persons do not take the effort to understand, or apathy is that they don't care, right? They don't invest. And the third, of course, are people who are deliberately averse to the scriptures, right? So for that reason, either they will read the scriptures to blaspheme them, or they will simply neglect the scriptures. So what's the result? That of these people who do things but not as per the scriptures. So Krishna says that they develop faith based on their own nature. And this is essentially a very tenuous, because one's own nature is fickle. And essentially the scriptures give us the guardrails, they give us the protection. So I'll share with you a story that appears in Ramayana. It appears in the Uttarakhand, that once a Brahmin, he came to the court of Lord Ram, and he was very angry. So Lord Ram asks him, why are you so angry? So he says, my son died. And so it's untimely. A son is not expected to die before the father. So the Brahman said, I never did anything impious, but I am your praja. So I am inheriting the sins of the king. So you must have done something to cause this unfortunate event to happen. So Lord Ram pacifies him, and then he begins to consider where is the fault that caused this event to happen. So at that time, Narad Muni appears, and then Narad Muni then tells him about Shambhuka. So he says that there is a Shudra by the name of Shambhuka who is at such and such place and is performing austerities and penances. So Lord Ram then meditates, and the Pushpak Viman comes, he gets onto that, heads south and goes to where Shambhuka is there. So there Shambhuka is hanging upside down from a tree doing meditation. So then Lord Ram stands in front of him and he says, what is the purpose of your penances? So Shambhuka says, and so this is where the importance of being holistic in your practices are there. So he does not even recognize the position of Lord Ram. So hanging upside down, he says that the reason I'm doing all this is so that I can defeat Indra. And Lord Ram says, why do you want to defeat Indra? He says, because I want to enjoy with his wife, Sachi. And so then there's the second aspect, that he's doing penances, but for a despicable reason, that he wants to enjoy with the wife of another, which is in any circumstances condemned, and this is the king of the demigods. So Lord Ram, he pulls out his sword and he beheads Shambhuka. And as soon as he beheads Shambhuka, the dead son of the Brahmana comes back to life. So the pastime is quoted to give a sense of why is it important to abide by the scriptures, and the dangers of not, because the scriptures, they're complex and interdependent, and we may not catch how it is creating this complete protection, this area of protection for us, by giving us the do's and the don'ts in every aspects of our life. That a person cannot proceed with austerities or penances unless the person has been instructed by a spiritual master, unless the person has gone through prior purification, unless the person understands intellectually the reason that why they are doing. So all these create a strong network of protection. And one who acts whimsically, basically he has blown away that guardrail. So he can cause trouble for himself and for others also. So, so now that Krishna has established that those who do not follow the scriptures are acting according to their nature, the question that comes up is, how do we determine the nature of the person? And how do we determine the kind of faith that the person has developed based on his nature? Because if one does not have faith on the scriptures, then one's faith is based on one's own swabhav. Swabhav is nothing but the resultant combination of the three modes of material nature, right? So the faith of such a person is determined by the person's nature. And the question is then, how do you know what is the nature of that person? How do you know what is the kind of faith of that person? Because faith is subtle. You can't, one does not, so the modes are represented by the three colors, but one does not acquire a certain color. One does not become red in the mode of passion or blue in black in the mode of ignorance. Faith is subtle. But how do you determine that faith? How do you determine the swabhav that is causing the faith? So then Krishna gives 4 ways by which it can be determined. Now, this is not the comprehensive list, right? But he gives 4 ways that typically can help. Right? If you want to diagnose a disease in a person, the disease may be manifesting several symptoms, but the doctors go for the more prominent symptoms. So food is something that everybody eats. Like there's nobody who does not eat. So by observing the kinds of food that the person is eating, one can determine the nature of the faith of that person, the swabhav of the person. Then sacrifice, austerity, and charity, they are mentioned because these are activities that are strongly predicated on faith, because there is no immediate result. So when you give something in charity, then it's not that as soon as you give in charity, you start getting back. Or it's not that as soon as you perform an austerity, at the end of that performance, something comes out. Right? It may come right away after that. It may come after 1,000 lifetimes. It may come after 100 years. So one who performs them out of faith. That I have faith that I'm performing some activities and something will come out of it. Right? So because these activities are strongly predicated on faith, when one can observe what kind of activities, what is the consciousness with which a person is performing these activities, one can discern the faith of the person. So faith also determines the nature of worship. Right, so we see that circle coming. Faith is determined by the swabhav. The swabhav is determined, or the swabhav can be discerned by what one eats and the kind of austerity, etc. And it results in a particular kind of worship. And while I have a lot of details in the PowerPoint that I'll share with you, I won't speak so much on it because the groups have spoken about it in fair amount of details. So people in the Satagun worship the demigods, and Prabhupada mentions the Panchopasana, the 5 prominent devas, Durga, Devi, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, and these are people who worship Lord Vishnu more as a demigod. Then Lord Ganesh and Surya. So these are 5 demigods, but there are 330 million demigods. So people in the mode of goodness worship the devas. The mode in passion, they worship demons, or they worship demoniac people. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of, there was a person in Calcutta and he used to worship Hitler. And the reason he worshipped Hitler was because whatever he was doing, this person was profiting a lot from it. So for him, Hitler was God. Or there are people who worship Kal Bhairavi, right? So there are people who worship demons. And then people in the mode of ignorance, they worship bhutas and pretas, ghosts and spirits. So there's a little bit of difference between bhut and preta, between the two. Bhuta is that when a person commits suicide, then he acquires the body of a ghost as a punishment. So the ghost body is essentially the person still has the subtle and obviously the spiritual body, but loses the gross body. but then the person lives the rest of the life that he was supposed to live in that ghostly body. And with all the desires, with the hunger and thirst and all the desires still there, but unable to fulfill it. Because there's no way for the person to drink water or eat food. So it's one of lot of suffering there. And then after that, after they end their life duration, whatever it is ordained, they, based on the karmas, they go to the next life form. And pretas is a little different, that everybody who dies becomes a preta. Exceptions are there, I'll tell you. But the way that the transmigration of the soul happens is that when a person dies, then there are 13 days in between the person giving up the body and getting the next body. So for those 13 days, the subtle body, it acquires a preta yoni. So it's a temporary body, which nevertheless a body, which actually grows during those 13 days. So that's why in the scriptures, what is recommended is that in those 13 days, there is something that is known as pindadan. So typically the sons or the relatives of this past person, they offer the person food and drink so that the person can take that in the preta yoni. If it is done with so this is all karma kanda. If it is done with the proper performance, then at the end of the 13 days, which is called tervi, the person then becomes from preta he becomes a pitra. So then he gets a body in pitra loka, but he continues to live there based on the oblations that are offered by the descendants. Now, this is not true for devotees. Devotees do not go through a preta body. So if the devotional service is complete, they will go back to Godhead. If it is not complete, they will immediately get the next birth. So they don't go through this intermediate stage. And in one of the Puranas, there is the story about once Lord Yamaraj, he gave the Yamadutas an address that you go and there is a person who is dying there, he's about to die, so you go and get his subtle body. So based on the address, the Yamadutas went to that place, but they couldn't see anything over there. There was no house, there was no person there. So they kept hanging around, thinking what's happening. And then they said maybe there was some mistake in the address. So they went to the neighboring house and they got the subtle body of the person over there. So when they returned to Yamraj, then Yamraj was very upset at them, saying that, why did you get the body of some other person? And they said, we can't help it. We went there and there was nobody, there was nothing over there. So Yamraj was puzzled. He said, you take me there. So he went along with the Yamadutas, and then there was actually nobody over there. So Yamraj started laughing then. And he said that the reason you cannot see this place is because there is a devotee lives in this place. And actually it is, in this particular case, he said the reason you can't see it because they had tulsi growing in front of the house. So just like it is said that the devotees never see the Yamadutas, the vice versa is also true. The Yamadutas are not able to see the devotees. They're not in the Padma Purana it's mentioned that they cannot see past the tulsi trees. There also it's mentioned they can't see past the amal tree. Amal is another auspicious plant, gooseberry trees. So it's the first plant that's created by Brahma. There's a whole chapter in Padma Purana that glorifies amal also. For Vaishnavas, Tulsi is the plant. So so devotees are they're in a different, this particular yoni of preta is for those who have never chanted Krishna's name, never honored prasadam, never given obeisances to a deity. It's for them, which unfortunately is actually the majority now. Okay, so moving on. So like I mentioned, because faith is subtle. So because faith is subtle, Krishna gives us these discernible symptoms. But in general, what we will see that the difference between the three modes, there's a common theme that will come. That mode of goodness, detachment. Mode of passion, attachment. Mode of ignorance, destruction. Right? So we'll see this general. It may manifest differently, but this is the general categorization. The person in the mode of goodness, detached from the fruits, detached from the activity. The question is then, what is the impetus? Why do they do it? If they are detached, and the answer is because of the sense of duty, that they do it out of sense of duty. Passion is they're attached, they want to enjoy what the results of what they're doing, and ignorance is that they're mentally in a different mind frame. Whatever they do, it causes destruction for them and those around them. So so these slides I'll go through a little quickly, because again they're mostly details. That food in the mode of goodness is juicy and fatty, mode of passion is bitter and salty, and mode of ignorance is stale and tasteless. In terms of eating, Prabhupada would say that people make two mistakes. That they either eat too much or they eat too little. And then he gave some kind of a formula that half your food should be filled with water, quarter should be filled with air, so you should eat quarter only. Another point he said that you should eat until you get your first burp and then not eat after that. But devotees are mitabhuk. Mitabhuk means that they eat sufficiently for allowing their body to do the service. And so they don't perform excessive austerities of eating very, very little, or they do not indulge excessively, like atyahara prayaschasya. Now, we do see devotees, like when we read the 6 Goswamis, they were eating very, very little. They were eating just enough. Raghunath Das Goswami, only enough that could fit in at the palm of his hand. But in their case, they were not eating less because they were doing it as an austerity. They were eating less because they were so absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So it was a side effect. It was not, they were not doing it because they wanted to do that, but they were so busy in Krishna Katha, in Vaishnav Sangha, that they just did not have, their mind did not go there. Okay, sacrifice, again, 3 kinds according to the direction of the scripture. The sattva, for the sake of pride, is the rajas, and tamas is disregard of scriptures. Now, a question can be asked over here that Krishna is speaking about those who do things without adhering to the scriptures. But then at the same time, he's saying that the one who is in the mode of sattva are acting according to the directions of the scriptures. Right? So there's an apparent contradiction. 3 ways to understand it. That they have occasional adherence to the scriptures. So sometimes they will adhere to the scriptures. And when they perform the yagyas in that mode, it's in the mode of goodness. The second is they have the yagya performed by those who have faith in the scriptures. So they may not have faith, but they engage the brahmanas who have faith in the scriptures. So they inherit that. And the third understanding is that yagya is, because yagya is connecting to the transcendence, the only way that it can exist is in accordance with the scriptures. So by definition, a yagya is one that is done in accordance with the scriptures. Otherwise, it's not really yagya. So that's how we reconcile this apparent contradiction, that Krishna is speaking about those who don't have faith in the scriptures, but then he's saying that those in the mode of goodness act according to the scriptures. Krishna also outlines 5 items that contaminate the sacrifice. Right? He says, one, that is whimsical, there is no distribution of prasadam, the mantras are not bona fide, there is no remuneration to the priest, and done without faith. So remuneration to the priest is important, especially like we see in ISKCON many times. The person who performs the yagyas will refuse remuneration. But according to the scriptures, that if the priest does not take the remuneration for the yagya, then all the benefit of the yagya accrues to the priest. So even though you may have engaged the priest to perform it for you, if you do not remunerate the priest, then you do not get the benefit of the yagya. The priest gets the benefit. That is one reason also that when japa malas are distributed, generally there is a guidance to ask for something in return. So that when the person, so japa mala is sankirtan yagya, so when the person does some yagya, that person gets the benefit of it. Because by remunerating you, then he has basically now taken ownership of the results of that yagya. Okay. So austerities, Krishna talks about 3 kinds of austerities. They're in progressive order of difficulty: austerity of body, speech, and mind. So it's a little counterintuitive, because we generally consider the austerity of body to be most difficult. You're fasting for a long time, or if you're waking up early in the morning. But actually, austerity of the body is the easiest. Austerity of the speech is either speaking, not speaking, or only speaking that which is beneficial. And austerity of the mind is even more difficult. So Krishna gives 5 qualities for austerities of the mind: that mind that is pure, satisfied, grave, self-controlled, and simple. That is the austerity of the mind. Okay. Charity is probably one of the easier ones to understand. Krishna gives 5 attributes to charity. It should be given without expectation of return, with full conviction, given to a worthy person, and given at a proper place and at a proper time. Right? So Prabhupada, in one of his lectures, he gives this, I'm not sure about what the source is, but then he gives this insight about charity, that if you give charity to a non-Brahmana, which means that to a person who's not worthy, then you get in return what you give in charity. You give $1, you get $1. If you give in charity to a half qualified Brahmana, then you give $1, you get $2 back. If you give in charity to a qualified Brahmana who is situated in the scriptures, then the charity returns 1,000 times. You give $1, you get back $1,000. Now, I'm using this just for simplicity. It's not necessarily you get money for money, but you get benefit for it. If you give charity to a devotee, Ved Paraga, Prabhupada says, you get unlimited returns in unlimited lifetimes. So Prabhupada quotes this one. So that is why, so Prabhupada was once asked that why are your people asking everybody for money? They're out on the streets begging for money, asking for money. And Prabhupada said that the people in the current age are so fallen that they will not give a little bit of charity for Krishna. But we want to help them also. So we beg, not for ourselves, but for their benefit. Because when we beg and if they give a little bit, even a token amount, they will get unlimited benefit. Their spiritual life has started. So that's the compassion of devotees. Once somebody said to Prabhupada that your disciples are always singing and dancing. I don't see them doing any work. And Prabhupada says, why do we have to work? Our father is Krishna, is very rich. No need for us to work. And another time, and Prabhupada was in, I think he was in Vrindavan, in a temple compound, and he was chanting in there. So one person from the outside, he looks in and he says, Swamiji, it looks like you're in a prison. And Prabhupada said, yes, you're right, but the prison is outside. So Prabhupada had this presence of mind, and he would speak Shastric truths. Okay, so what have we established so far? That anything and everything done under the boards is binding, right? Anything that we eat, any sacrifice that we do, any charity that we give, whether it's in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance, it is binding. So what do we do? So at this point, Krishna is paraphrasing Arjun's question. So what Arjun is asking is, how can one, driven by the modes, break free of the modes and return to Krishna? Otherwise, the question is just an academic inquiry. Is how do we know the person's goodness, passion, and ignorance? What do we get out of it? Nothing. Right? Okay, you find out this person is in the mode of goodness, fine. Right? He still gets a material body. So that's not how Bhagavad Gita works. Bhagavad Gita works to give you the ultimate benefit. That having understood that the modes are binding, how do we break through the modes? So general hierarchy is that there are people who are faithless, like completely material people. Then there are people that are being spoken about in this chapter who have faith but non-scriptural faith. Then there are people who have faith in the scriptures. And then there are people who have transcendental faith. So what Krishna is doing is, he's taking them from wherever they are and getting them to the stage of transcendental faith. That's the real purpose of this chapter. And that is what the concluding set of verses 23 to 28 speak about Om Tat Sat. So the point that Krishna makes, so there's this explanation of how Om Tat Sat is the representative of Krishna, right? So Om is the sound representation. It considered to represent Sambandha. Tat is the qualitative oneness of the Jiva with Krishna and the way to attain it. So it is Abhidaya. Sat is eternal, which is Prayojan, which is basically being established in your eternal relationship. So Om Tat Sat together means I offer this to Krishna for being able to be situated in my eternal relationship to Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada actually in the Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 14th chapter, verse 48, he explains that how Om Tat Sat and Hare Krishna Mahamantra are non-different. That this is what we are praying in Hare Krishna, that please give me a opportunity to serve. And that's what, if you understand the real meaning of Om Tat Sat. So the point that is made is that when you're doing all these activities of charity and austerity, if you do them in conjunction with Om Tat Sat, then the activities become transcendental. Transcendental means that they will transcend the modes. Your faith, from becoming a faith that is predicated on the modes, becomes sublime faith. Right? So sublime is an interest. Sublimation is a chemical process which basically talks about how solids can become gas without going through the liquid stage. Right? If you heat camphor, then it just becomes gas. There is no intermediate phase. So that is sublimation. So sublime faith is that one that will take you from wherever you are to the final destination. You don't have to go through the intermediate stages. Right? So Krishna is essentially instilling this path for sublimation, that you do fine, you're in the modes, you do not have faith in the scriptures, you're acting, but do it in conjunction with Om Tat Sat. Start with just uttering Om Tat Sat, and then as you utter, your faith will increase. You will go to the scriptures, and then they will take you to the next level. So this is a summary that you can read. So this is the end, and probably out of time also. So we'll have the question answers in the next week. Next week there's no presentation because 18th chapter is kind of long chapter. I'm going to take the full hour to do the 18th chapter. The week after that, if we can have this, so the Gita, as you know, also topically is distributed amongst these 5 topics: Krishna, Jiva, Kal, Prakriti, and Karma. So if the groups can take it, this is a good way to also read the entire Bhagavad Gita, right? So when you speak about Krishna, then beginning from chapter 1 to 18th chapter, what does Bhagavad Gita speak about Krishna? That in the 14th verse of the first chapter, Krishna first appears. And he is carrying the chariot. That is Krishna as Bhaktavatsa. In the 11th chapter, he appears as, so the theme of Krishna is who Krishna is developed throughout the Bhagavad Gita, right? Jiva and Kala, they're relatively, that's why I lumped them, also because they're 4 groups, but they're also smaller topics. Prakriti, if you do an analysis of the verses, the maximum number of verses speak about Prakriti, the modes of material nature. And karma is not spoken that much directly, but as you know, the first 6 chapters, they revolve around karma. So my request would be to take the 2 weeks and each of the group study the Bhagavad Gita and present on these topics. So the week after that would be completely dedicated to this presentation and any question answers on the 18th chapter or the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so I will stop here with one last announcement that if any of you has submitted your exam paper and have not yet received the graded answer sheet, if you can contact either me or Chaitanya Ras Prabhu, just to make sure that, I just want to make sure that nothing has fallen through the cracks. Okay, so we'll end over here. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripā sindhubhya cha patitānaṁ pāvanebhyo Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai ho. Thank you so much.
Everybody.